The Consumer Bankers Association is pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Automated Title, the Hype, Myths, and Facts presented by Accurate Group. My name is Isabella, and it is my pleasure to facilitate today's event. Thank you for joining. Please note we are recording and all participant lines are muted. If you have any trouble, please email conferences@consumerbankers.com or send a message in the Q&A box. This presentation will last up to 60 minutes and will include Q&A opportunities at the end. You may submit a question at any time by entering the questions into the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, the views expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not represent the views of CBA or its members. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers: Steve Bukowski, COO of Accurate Group; Rami Zabora, CTO of Accurate Group; Ryan Yeager, COO and CISO of Fluid; and Liz Lilly, VP of Fluid. Steve, Rami, Ryan, and Liz, welcome.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us today as we talk about automated title, the hypes, the myths, and the facts. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're dialing in from today. And let's go ahead and get started. So what you're going to learn today and what we're going to talk about in a little more detail is as digital technology takes hold in the mortgage and home equity lending industry specifically, vendors are promoting automated title and instant title as an answer to the title efficiency woes. Is the hype founded? Not always, not in all cases. And in this webinar, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to help you identify myths that are being propagated around instant title. We're going to talk about what automated instant title solutions can and cannot do, and how to leverage automated title data in particular in ways that won't increase your risk, but will improve your efficiency. We're going to start off with some myths, move in some facts, and then we're going to end with a session really around some automated title, what it can do for you in AI. But before we start going into the myths, we want to start off with a poll. Are you currently using an automated title solution product within your home equity workflow today? You have everybody about 45 seconds or so to provide a response. And we'll see what the results are. I feel like there should be some Jeopardy music playing.
Exactly.
That's about 50-50. That's actually interesting. We're definitely seeing more and more. We're hearing from more of our clients and our partners, as we work with Fluid and others within the industry, that is becoming more of a process. So 50-50 is actually a pretty good basis. If you had asked the same question about 5 years ago, I think you would have had a much smaller number.
Yeah, that's exciting to see, Steve.
Absolutely. That's good. That means we definitely have some individuals here that are educated and have experienced this process. So let's start with the automated title myths first. The first myth that we're going to talk about today is all automated title solutions use the same data and decisioning practices and are essentially the same product with different names. Really what the basis for this myth is if you go back to the root of public data, a title search really is relaying public data. So if public data is uniform, then all models in theory should be the same. They're all pulling from the same singular data source. That's really not the case. Public data is the primary data component. Starts with that public data recorder database, but really how the models and how the products integrate other data sources, as well as developing historical data records and going back in time. Not all automated title platforms either weigh risk the exact same way. So risk elimination models and subscribe to robust data sets equally doesn't necessarily occur. So there's differences not only in how that data or what data is accessed, but how that data is used and potentially what level of risk is associated with that data return. And then finally, as we kind of talk about that data return, not only is the data component a potential risk, but there's certain things in each model that can be more greater or larger areas of concern. Legal descriptions are not fully recordable. Is an abbreviated will be accepted as a true meets and bounds legal description. Taxes and data currency obviously are always issues and potential gap risks, whether it's historical due to depth, currency, or just because the data source itself may have some inconsistencies within it.
So Steve, that's an interesting one, right? I think we can all agree that while the availability and even the depth of the currently available public record continues to strengthen, right? Over time, it continues to strengthen. Everybody can get access to that more public record. So that's where it starts to get interesting on how you augment that data with other data sources that can really power or really eliminate the risk or reduce the risk of a transaction. And that's where we kind of think, you're talking about how do we look at the data to build an automated title platform, right? And how can you get there? How do you look at, the public available data, which follows more traditional process? And then how do you really step by that individual rule-based process in order to understand the picture of what the property or the borrower might look like? And then how do you tell that whole story by then bringing in additional data sets, right? It might be something that a traditional searcher might look at, but can we do it from a machine vision or other layer of data that we can layer into it in order to really understand the true story of that property and understand the risk that's associated with it?
Absolutely agree. And to your point, that data layering is so key. I know 2005, when I first started and worked on my first automated model, it was two data sources, public record and credit. Today, that has dramatically extended itself.
And that's actually another really interesting point is while you have those data sources, but being able to triangulate into an authoritative, field or authoritative field that will allow you to move forward, in an automated without really the human perspective on it.
Absolutely.
Another point here too, Steve, just to add on, is it's also about the data itself, but it's also the decisioning practices and how that data is not just cross-triangulated, but how the outputs or those alerts that come out of the automated systems of record to tell you what's going on with the condition of title come together. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about both those data inputs, but how can we leverage a kind of rules-based approach to the logic to really understand why certain decisions were made, why certain alerts might have been flagged within the automated title process, what those risk layers are, rather than just coming to it with sort of kind of an AI-based model that's made decisions on its behalf. We need to understand how you can walk that back, how those decisions were made. So it's a combination of both the data inputs and the way that the system is architected that really set different solutions apart and help really, advance the industry at large.
Completely agree, Liz. Great point. Moving on to the second myth. All title searching can be automated, making manual title searching redundant. So manual searching's going away. That is absolutely a myth. There will not be, not in the near future, I don't even be in the long future, a 100% automated solution for title. Title is extremely complex. There's always going to be searches. What automated title can do, though, is optimize those resources. So when you look at it, data, while better, it's not complete. It's never going to be 100% fully complete. Identifying those gaps as a title expert, title professional is going to be key. And how you supplement, once again, that non-public data. The more data you supplement, the more AI and machine learning and LLM, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation, can be leveraged, kind of closes those gaps, make it more efficient. But there are always going to be unique, complex title situations. Instant data is, and instant data is a term I don't like to use personally. I like automated data. Instant data kind of reminds me of instant mashed potatoes, and you click a button, there's always something sitting there in front of you. But it's automation of the process, speeding it and streamlining and making it more efficient, which is why I like the term automated. But the data, the model is only as good as the inputs, right? If you put bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. Now you could have algorithms that help identify that bad data, which is really the key and what Fluid's so good at working with. And of course, how you identify the historical depth and currency limitations of that data. If a person purchased a property 30 years ago, that may not be in the historical records yet, unless you've done a recent search. Also, if something happened last week, depending on some of the currency updates, some of those models may not have taken on that data yet. So there's always going to be a need for the manual title expert as part of that solution. Do you agree?
So I completely agree with that, right? I mean, we can envision a world where, call it 80–90% of all transactions can be supported by an automated engine, right? And I say supported because you can kind of break that into a couple layers, right? If you have enough data, enough data is available to you to confidently move forward with the transaction, then you can, you can essentially move it into a fast category is what we call. If you don't have enough data, you can still optimize the process, right? And that's what's really important. That's kind of what Liz touched on earlier, is still collecting that data, still bringing that data forward throughout the life cycle of the transaction, right? And that's going to pinpoint, okay, we got it this far, right? You can get it this far. You can make sure you're to a specific point that now you have to hand it over to, the professionals to do the searching and to do any of that background. And that's really, why we say we can support 80–90% of it. It's really, some are going to be fast. Obviously, we're all going to try and optimize, get the available data to kind of see it end to end. But there's always going to be those outlier cases. There's always going to be that data that is not available for us to ingest into an engine.
But to your point, Ryan, even in those instances where it might fall outside of that 80 or 90%, there's still efficiencies, there's still automation, there's still advantages to using an automated title solution to help expedite that process and really streamline the workflow at large, because you have that very prescriptive, very clear snapshot pinpointed versus having to do kind of the universe of a search that might have been required without the tools originally. Am I kind of summarizing that correctly?
That's right. So from my side, I mean, that still allows you to get to that 3 to 5 day close, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to look at, is how do you get to that close by optimizing the process. Some, you can expedite it. Some you are very focused on what you need to cure and then move forward to still maintain that kind of concatenated timeline.
There, I kind of look at it as an analogy. I know we have some of our attendees have appraisal backgrounds, as I've seen them join the crew. A little bit kind of like cascades or hybrid appraisals, right? You take the appraiser and you put the expertise. In this case, you put that title examiner, that title searcher, and the automation helps identify where do you need that expertise in the process. Where is it most beneficial? Really empowers the whole title process. Moving on to myth 3. Automated title is as accurate and as safe as traditionally searched title and improves the consumer experience by being faster. This one's tricky because in some ways it can be true. It can be a fact, but really overall it's a myth. Automated title at face value is not necessarily as accurate as safe. It can be in certain utilizations and can actually improve things in some ways. So the question really you should be asking yourselves is the automated title provider standing behind their data, and are they assuming liability? Or are they just pushing that liability onto the end user? That's constant battle between hit rates. I've seen quite a few RFPs in my day. First primary questions are hit rate, how high can you get, and how low of a price point can you get? Those are metrics. That's part of the equation. But the third real big one is that risk, and how much can you depend on that data? Does it put risk on you as an end user, or are you getting the same risk component or the same securitization security of that title product as if you'd done a full manual search? Alta policy is a great example. When using automated within refinance purchase for auto policies, there's a policy associated with it. We're standing behind that data. Same thing on the title side. Are you using a warranty? Are you getting strength behind that O&E, that ownership and income risk report? Those data gaps, are they your responsibility because you're only getting data? And I've heard that more often than not. Or are you getting a product that leverages all these things we've been talking about with Ryan and Liz? And the third bullet point here, which is really interesting, automated title solutions leveraging title risk analysis tools and black box algorithms introduce vulnerabilities to lenders and consumers by only predicting the likelihood of a title defect. Ryan and Liz, what's that mean?
So kind of taking a little bit of a step back, right? When we look at an automated title engine, you really have to, like the broader technology, right? You have to say, what are you solving for? Are you truly, is your one and only focus only on that hit rate? How fast can you go, right? And in our industry, that's not true to title. So we believe you need to stay true to title. And that ties back to what you're talking about, right? A truly automated title engine is really just taking historics, training, and doing a predictive of, we think this is going to be the outcome. It's not actually weighing in on our authoritative data sources, right? So that's why we think, and Steve, you hit it right on, right? It's a balance between risk reduction or risk elimination, and the hit rate. And if people are very, very adamant on leaning onto the hit rate, by nature, you're going to start accepting risk. Where, again, we come back to the very true to following traditional title. And that's why we'll say a rules-based engine is going to be a lot less risk, tolerant or risk accepting for the agent than what a rules-based engine would be. And that's where, again, we've kind of covered on it a couple different times, is using the rules-based engine, using authoritative data sources, and then filling it in with more interesting indicators, right? And this is where, we can use an example of like UCC loans. Okay, if you're not able to automate the curing of title, or you see an outstanding lien on a property and it doesn't match with, call it an authoritative credit, poll or something to that regard, we can start to look at, very interesting data sources using, again, we're kind of talking AI here, so using machine vision. So you can look at Google Maps, you can get an indicator if there's potentially solar on that roof. And now you can, again, we're not going to accept the risk to say, we guarantee those are a match, but we can use it as an indicator to go forward and say, okay, this is something very good to go back to, the agent or the appraiser or whoever and say, is there title on this? And you can cure that a lot faster than if you started looking at, again, a bunch of outstanding liens on a property, and every city and state and county handles solar liens differently. So we can look at those creative sources to say, we're not super focused on just pushing that order forward because most likely that's solar. We want to be authoritative. So the hit rate will be less the more information you bring in. Well, I guess, it could go either way, right? It could go down if you bring in information that says that, this lien is outstanding, or you can bring in information that allows you to cure it automatically and move it forward. So it's a very fine line between that hit rate and risk. We feel following traditional title is the right way to do it. It's what's accepted. It's supporting your underwriter in that regard. So make sure you're risk focused versus hit rate, and then we can start to iterate forward into the hit rate.
That's a great example, Ryan, too, of bringing in additional data sources that may be outside the traditional title search component. Using satellite images to determine, yeah, there's solar panels on that house. We should be looking at there's a solar lease or a UCC out there. So, great example. We have one more myth before we finish the first section of the presentation. We have another poll, and then we'll move into the facts. Myth number 4, the data intelligence and decision used by automated title solutions only deliver efficiency within the title process. I think this is really a question kind of about focus, right? So the question asked, why couldn't this same intelligence be used beyond title underwriting to change workflows and streamline the closing experience on every transaction? Not just the transactions that get to the point in the underwriting process where you're requesting a full title search. By incorporating data and decisioning into this title process, a new set of insights are unlocked in seconds about a property and its consumers, intricately linked to title's condition. That's a mouthful as well, isn't it? But this intelligence can be used and made available upstream, so lenders can instantly verify condition of title and accelerate applications and clear title during the underwriting process without finding about things later in the stage. A couple different examples I like to use on this, is are you finding out there's a trust? If you pull a quick title when you have your borrower on the phone, you're discussing the application, and you identify there's a trust, you can ask for the trust documentations. You can ask some details at that point, as opposed to finding out or disclosing or discovering it later in the title process, potentially delaying your closing cycle. You have others finding non-borrowing parties that are entitled to the property. That's another good example. So, Ryan, Liz, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this one in particular is automated title by nature, automated title makes it seem like it's very limited to the title process, right? What we've really started to see kind of the industry at large talk about is how we can start shifting left some of those insights so that lenders are finding out about issues while they've got the consumer on the phone, or right upstream in their process to be able to ask those questions. The examples you gave are the perfect examples of that, right, Steve? And so really it's this idea of you can use title automation, you can use the intelligence that was unlocked because of automated title solutions to really create a more integrated and streamlined process even farther upstream beyond just the title process itself. So there's this new level of connectivity through the idea of a verification of title sort of category that really allows it to work in its best capacity. And so, we're really excited to see how this continues to extend beyond just title, and that intelligence is being so respected and sort of taken as a new input to a process that maybe traditionally it hadn't been seen as valuable, to a place where it really is helping everyone collaborate and drive a better experience in the long run.
Yeah, the consumer experience is the absolute thing, and a better underwriting process, from application to closed book loans. So we will talk about that a little bit more when we get to the facts section. I know we got a slide that provides a couple different data points and different elements that can be used throughout the process.
One thing to add to that, Steve, just really quickly, is why that's important. Again, we're talking about improving the process, right? And if we have that data, specifically the authoritative data, pushed forward at the onset, it really does allow the consumer experience, right? I mean, the chance of a rate lock fallout is going to be less. So there's going to be a lot of benefit to the consumer up front if that data is used.
Sure, completely agree, Ryan. I did put the next poll up, so everybody should have got a little bit of a head start. I'm expecting at least 50% of you to say yes, since 50% of you are using automated title in your process sometime today. But we'll give you a few seconds to end the second poll to see if you tested or you have a pilot in process. Especially now that we've expanded the concept of automated title. It's not just the title decisioning section. All right, so slightly increased. So of the 50% or so individuals on the call who aren't using automation in some way on the title component, about a third are starting to look at it. So we're going to consider to see this number kind of accelerate as we move throughout the process.
Be interesting to know if they're currently in the piloting phase, or
Sure.
what that feedback.
Yeah, what kind of results they're seeing. So let's move into the facts. Fact number one, automated title is being used today in a variety of ways throughout the industry and often behind the scenes. That's absolutely true. We use automated title behind the scenes, and I think we've been using it for the 20 years I've been in title to speed up the process and make our final offering, where I manually search, more efficient. Strong providers use automation to improve efficiency and reduce cost. And home equity, everyone definitely knows, for consumer lending, price point is definitely a major item because most lenders are incurring that cost themselves. But looking forward, many providers are also looking to provide a verification of title service up front. We talked about those two examples I gave of how you can provide information up front that eventually would be on an ownership and encumbrance report or a traditional property report, but prevents those stop gaps, those roadblocks later in the process that tend to take, what could be a very short cycle time for a closed loan and adds 10, 15 days to it while data is being gathered. And of course, we referenced this before, using this automation is often used in conjunction with trained title professionals who utilize automated components, provide starter searches for themselves, as well as provide historical perspective on a prior transaction. One component that came up in a conversation, Ryan, we were having earlier, is the fact that automation can review very lengthy documents that are in public record and can identify phrases that may not be in the sections of the document where it typically is. Vesting, for example. You may look at a mortgage document or a vesting document and see husband and wife is on page 6, as opposed to where it typically is with the document. Automation can do that quickly. It's something that does take quite a bit of time for an individual who's an examiner, for example.
I think you're spot on again, Chris, or Steve, sorry. It's a lot of us have used automated title to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And that's where we want to try and get that, more to the forefront without introducing risk, like we talked about before. And like you said, I mean, you can get book page numbers up front, something that's indexable that lets you go straight to the source. There's, but specifically to home equity, having that data and having that early look that Liz was talking about brings more specific data to the home equity transaction. So up front, if you're able to say, okay, this is your AVM of the property, this is the potential, value and what that equity line is for that owner, we can then look and say, are there outstanding delinquent tax liens? Are there other things that are in the way that we can really hone that the nature of, is the home equity, HELOC the right way to go? And what is the actual equity versus just the assumed equity? It's a lot of information that you can bring forward upfront to decision and disclose to the consumer very early on. So there's a lot of efficiency gains to be had by continuing to lean into the automated title mentality.
And it's being used today by whoever's providing your title, in some ways using automated title.
Absolutely.
Fact number 2, data continues to improve as both historical depth and data access broadens. We mentioned that before earlier on. Obviously, historical depth continues to grow. Multiple data providers out there are doing a great job at capturing public records, and they have been for a while. You don't see as many gaps as you used to, though some of those historical gaps are there, but as they age, they get farther away. You have less homeowners necessarily, less public records that don't have immediately access to 30 years worth of data or 40 years worth of data as you did 10 years ago. 10 years from now, that number will continue to decrease and that depth will continue to expand. So it's going to definitely grow. But the other thing within the industry is the repetitive searches or the repetitive components. We talked about complexity within that title search. A great thing automation also does a great job of is saying, hey, listen, we had this same challenge before. We addressed this issue. We went with that expert title and had to go through Lady Bird deeds and the judgments, et cetera. We've already resolved that issue. We did 2 years ago. Now let's bring that forward. Let's take advantage immediately. All the work that was done before, that complex situation that was resolved, take advantage of it. Now it's clear. Let's bring that forward. Now we've got a cleaner title, as opposed to you start all over. You go through the entire lengthy process again, and you've got the same issues and the same complexity and the deliverable. And then the last bullet point on here was something we're going to talk about quite a bit in the later slides. Rami is going to jump in and assist our panelists. But artificial intelligence, language learning models, LLMs, and machine learning vision tools are strengthening technology when deployed purposely. Ryan and Liz, what does that mean to you?
So this comes back to really strengthening the data sets, right? And I think we'll go into this a lot more deeper with Rami. But this is where using the appropriate technology.
I think we have an artificial intelligence issue right now with Ryan. He got cut off.
Yeah, I see Ryan is having technical issues, but like Ryan was saying, the artificial intelligence component is gonna pretty much provide a lot of different aspects. Is going to assist and make this process a lot more efficient. We can touch on it once we get to the AI section, but it's pretty exciting. It's gonna make this whole automated title process more and more efficient and more pretty much is going to provide speed and hopefully minimize risk as well.
Thanks, Ryan. And Ryan, you're back now. I see it, but you froze. You did a freeze on us.
All right. Sorry about that. I think I'm back.
That's
I mean,
okay.
what we were saying is making sure we use, and thanks, Rami, for jumping in. That's kind of where I was going to go, is the right technology for the right purpose, right? And that's really to continue to augment data quickly. And I mean, there's a lot of OCR technologies that use machine, learning and natural language processing, and that goes through extensive iterations of training to get there, right? In order to get a confidence score that you're comfortable using going forward. And with the introduction of LLMs, specifically private LLMs, right, you can start to extract things real time using prompt engineering, and that allows you to triangulate based on kind of the tried and true, certain kind of text extracting, and then getting that information from LLMs without going through that extensive training iteration, both of an expense and a time and a lot of source files. You use prompt engineering to get that output what you want, and then you triangulate it to get the confidence behind it.
And I think too, Ryan, it's also about how that can help us identify the trends either within the data or within those repeat transactions, where you can then create a rules-based logic point within the decisioning that says, hey, we know this is a repeat item that continues to be flagged. Let's make sure that's a part of our search component moving forward. It's a risk point. We need to make sure that that's evaluated. And so it's also, bringing those patterns, recognizing them, and creating some sort of alert or indicator within then the logic flow of the actual platform itself to say, these are repeated risks that we're starting to see emerge. Let's make sure we're, finding data points that can either support that or indicating that to the title examiner so that they're aware of it. And then again, back to risk, you're having that more complete picture of the consumer or the property and what's happening there. So you can make those really smart and really good decisions.
The last takeaway there is, I mean, that's part of really what we want to kind of come back and say that's why a rules-based engine is critically important, because you can continue to bolt on these analyzers, right? And it's not just that, assume the risk or predict that this is going to be the case based on historic. It really does allow you to analyze that additional data set very quickly and iterate through as you move through the automated process.
Optimizing efficiency.
That's right.
Fact number 3, third and final fact. We had 4 myths. I think we only have 3 facts. When used properly, automated title can be an effective component of a strong loan underwriting process that reduces origination times and improves the overall customer experience. Notice I said loan underwriting process. I didn't say title underwriting process, because that data can be used at the front end of your application process as well as throughout the process. So front application process is, early identification, verification of title items to avoid lengthy delays later in the underwriting process. We already mentioned some of the vesting components. Could be condominium related, could be property related, could be delinquent tax information that you're going to have to talk to your consumer about. It's better to understand some of that information up front as opposed to later in the process. And of course, it's part of a cascade. Title decisioning tools used by trained title professionals can speed up the review of title for a high percentage of properties, providing a lender with a comprehensive ownership and encumbrance property report, without increasing the risk to lender. That last piece is really important. Not increasing the risk to the lender. When you look back historically, once again, when you're going with hit rate and cost, a lot of times, you can increase your hit rate, you can lower the cost, but there's a risk associated with that. Is the provider going to stand behind their product? Is it just a race to have the highest hit rate, or is it the race to give you, the lender, a decisionable product that you can use throughout the process, that you can stand behind, and you personally don't have to have the expertise to determine, is there something here I should be questioning? I can rely upon this product.
I love what you hit on that, Stephen, the word you use. It's a part of that cascade. I think that's so important as a takeaway from this conversation, that front end product and the downstream title solution, they really are designed to work hand in hand. So you have this matching information, and it's that integrated workflow. There's a new level of connectivity. It's about really understand and verifying at a macro level the condition of title, and then each of those teams use it in a unique way, right? The lender, you might be using it to ask certain questions or set certain workflows all the way upstream within your own internal processes, whereas the title professional might be using that same information to make sure that they uncover and understand the risks, they're curing the risks, they know exactly what to clear. But they're this complementary, beautiful orchestra between the two things that are really designed to be a cascade and achieve that verification of title sort of category, versus it just being looked at as that downstream automation point, like we mentioned earlier.
All right, thank you very much, Liz. All right, so I mentioned before we'd show a couple other different data points and elements that could be part of the overall process. So this particular list, and I will not read each one of these bullet points. It will be available as part of the PowerPoint presentation after this webinar. But there's different items within title data records or associated with title data records that can provide additional value throughout that process. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because we only have an hour and we're already 35 minutes in. So one last poll, if you would please put it up. Are you planning to implement automated title data? We already know 63% of you have a plan. The real question is, for those of you who don't, historically in the future, are you looking at it?
I know what I want the answers to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think everybody has it on a roadmap, even if they don't realize it, because there's that automation, and
Optimization component of it.
continues to optimize, correct. And even if the lender yourself isn't, your providers are, because we're continuing to do it.
Correct.
Let's see you guys.
Uh,
All right. 64. So you still got about 25% that really aren't looking at doing it. Or at least aren't planning to implement automated title. And there's a couple different ways you can take that question. Not directly in terms of engaging directly for automated product, but getting it in conjunction with a manual product, which is really what we offer, total solutions. So that's interesting. All right, so now I'm going to hand over the lead to Rami Zabora, who's my half of the technology half of this presentation team from the Accurate Group. And Ryan and Liz will work in conjunction with Rami as we go through the role of AI and automated title as solutions continue to mature.
Thank you, Steve. Ryan and Liz, apologies for joining late. We just had some technical difficulties at the beginning. So with that being said, let's talk about how we can incorporate artificial intelligence with automated title process. So we can look at how AI can specifically benefit lenders. And as the audience can see, there is a lot of different applications or subfields for AI. There's narrow AI, general AI, super intelligence, NLP, which is natural language processing, which we'll touch on a little bit, expert systems, and machine learning. So one of the key areas where AI can incredibly be valuable for lenders is data verification, validation. So think about, Ryan touched on computer vision and machine vision earlier, where it can help cross-reference extracted information with databases and records to ensure that that information is accurate and that data is accurate. Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's very interesting, right? Because not only do you want to make sure that that data is accurate and, like we talked about, kind of triangulate or using different things, but understanding what you're looking at for the ultimate goal to reduce risk, right? That's the game we're in here. Is can you bring enough data? You're mentioning document classification. We're a very doc image heavy industry. So is the image that you're looking at the right document that you're supposed to have, right? And can you bring that forward into the LOS, the POS, extract the fields, and then augment it with the additional data sets that we're talking about? And again, each one kind of takes a different approach to AI, and each form of AI serves a very, very interesting and important role.
Yeah, so speaking of risk, when it comes to risk assessment, AI can help in a lot of different ways. Like you can develop algorithms that can assess the risk associated with property title. It can be based on historical data. It can also be placed on any presence of issues or legal disputes. So lenders can make more informed decisions, using this data and this, the risk assessment.
That's right. And then bringing that confidence score forward allows you to do that, analysis on what I would say is the indicator that you're bringing forward with AI.
Absolutely. So another crucial aspect, in AI that can be used is keyword detection. So going back to computer vision models, we can train those models to identify specific keywords or specific phrases that are mainly relevant to the title property searches. This can include, the owner names, the legal descriptions, any dates. That can also help lenders quickly pinpoint any critical information they need without having to do a lot of the manual searches that they do today.
That's right. I mean, a lot of those fields that takes a manual, and again, arguably you should still have a manual oversight on it, but a traditional one in our industry is a full legal description. Very hard to extract, very manual and time consuming to type, what could be a half a page to span multiple pages on a full legal description. Using, private LLMs, you can actually bring majority of that data, if not all of that data forward with the confidence score, and then you really just have a compare. And that makes it a lot easier and even reduces a human error component because now they're reading and comparing versus having to type. So there's a lot of efficiency gains.
Absolutely. And once you bring that data in, to a private LLM model, you can do document classification. You can use NLP, models where you can classify the documents based on the content, based on the type. You can put them in different categories, your deeds, mortgages, liens, or any relevant type, which allows you to streamline the process further, down the road, and to make this process a little bit more efficient. It's actually going to add a lot of efficiencies to it.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it already does. I mean, today, the Accurate Group, we utilize these functions throughout our process. We have our national title production facilities, and every one of these components we have integrated in some way at some level.
And that allows you to get to that point of really generating the TCR or preliminary title report, right? Having those components, extracting it, classifying it, that's all your roadmap or building block to get to what would be your property report.
Yep.
Absolutely. So we can also talk about, report generation. It's another area where AI shines. AI, can automatically generate, detailed property reports, property title reports based on any information that's got extracted from different types of documents. It can provide a summary for ownership history, for example, any relevant details regarding that. And that also will add a lot of, time saving to the lenders, in this process, moving forward as well.
And it's not just time that you're saving, you're also saving fees potentially, right? Whether it be data access fees. So it's also a monetary component that could be passed to consumer or part of the life cycle of the product.
Right. So Steve, we move on to the next slide where we can talk more about where AI-powered algorithms can help lenders. There's a lot of trends going on. There's machine learning and data validation, predictive analytics, predictive title searches. So AI-powered algorithms can play a big role, in the lending and real estate industry. It can provide a little bit, several benefits and a lot of capabilities. So, for example, document processing and extractions. AI can streamline the process of reviewing and processing, property-related documents. It can automatically scan, extract relevant information from a large volume of documents that you have access to. And again, like we touched before, such as deeds, mortgages, legal agreements, and property titles. This is going to also reduce the time, the effort, and a lot of the manual document review to ensure more accuracy of that data extraction.
No, absolutely. And it goes multiple depths, right? As you're talking about, fraud detection is a great one, right? You know who's touched the file, the history of the property. But you can also bring in those additional analytics that we're talking about, which could be FEMA trends, right? Is this area known for floods, for fires? Can you then use that as an indicator to say, hey, while this was listed as a single family home or a structure, is it really landlocked now because it was in a FEMA zone? And what is the likelihood, going forward? So there's a lot of predictive analysis you can do on these properties to bring that efficiency forward.
Absolutely. I mean, and it goes back to the risk assessment and prediction, especially with machine learning models. If you can analyze the historical property transaction and you can identify patterns, then learning from past cases can help train those AI models to assess any potential risk moving forward, especially with a particular property transaction. And it should enable the lenders to make a better informed decision at that point.
Flagging that risk, I love what you said there, right? Flagging that risk is really what you can do as well with that pattern recognition. I mean, that's such a key component is, the traditional life cycle, especially if you can kind of articulately understand the story of behind a property and a consumer, right? You have enough data forward, you have an understanding, pattern recognition of both the consumer and the property. You can start to be able to flag potential fraud or anything for that human review component.
Absolutely. We can always, also use it for, even when we analyze the property transaction data for market trend analysis, also for fraud detection. There's a lot of, cases where we can train the AI algorithm to monitor property transactions in real time and detect unusual patterns for any signs of fraud, for example. You can flag transactions that involve identity theft, property flipping issues, or any other fraudulent activities. It goes back to the same with the data privacy compliance as well, where AI can help, ensure the compliance with any data privacy, any regulations. We can redact and automatically redact any sensitive information of any of these documents that are shared during any transaction.
Right. I think, and again, those are all data elements that you're looking at, right? And it doesn't
Absolutely.
necessarily need to be the data elements associated with the transaction itself, but it's really that how the transaction flowed or who the participants of the transaction is, how many times this person fell out, because of XYZ or potential fraud, or even if there's, I mean, it can even, again, like we've talked about, that pattern recognition. If you have a married couple, and then all of a sudden you're moving forward with, into the application process as just a single borrower, right? You can start to say, well, historically they were paired. We still show that they're a married couple. Do you want to bring that forward? So there's a lot of trending that you can do, not only from, the actual field, but understanding where it is. And then like you're talking about, even understanding some of the logging, right? The technology logging behind it to say this is a high risk transaction.
So is that, with all that being said and all the hype, and all the uses for artificial intelligence, well, let's bring that one back to reality a little bit. Okay, so it's always important to remember that AI systems still require human monitoring, human oversight, especially, for example, in any cases that involve, a complex situation or legal complexities or any unique situations. You can't depend 100% on artificial intelligence to make that decision without any oversight.
I mean, we would never agree to that, right? I mean, that's such a, what we've kind of talked about through this whole webinar today is you can use AI to augment, to streamline, to acquire additional data sources, right? Whether they're unique from machine vision component, whether they're back-end logging, but they all need to be treated as indicators, not black box. And that's what's critically important to us, is making sure we know where the data came from. Again, like we said, you can triangulate it, you can validate it, you can get them higher confidence on it, but you never want to go black box, or you're purely just relying on trend. And if you actually action on that, you're introducing extensive risk.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, AI models need extensive training, and keyword is high quality data to perform effectively. Integrating AI into a workflow, it requires, planning, a lot of data preparation, a lot of testing, a lot of tweaks, a lot of adjustments until that model is trained to be able to get as close of, a decision as it should. But you definitely cannot rely 100% without doing any of these steps.
And that goes into your source files, right? Any of the traditional AI training, like you said, I mean, very extensive, very compute heavy. Did you take every use case into consideration? And then, I mean, did the AI, weight nodes throw certain of those out? In which case you don't even know because it's black box. So even though you might have said, oh, I threw one or two examples of that in that source file for training, you don't know what the weight structure of it is to know if it's even taken that in consideration.
Absolutely. And lastly, and it's also, worth noting, and, that even though that while AI can make predictions based on data analysis, AI cannot predict the future, with any absolute certainty whatsoever. All these predictions are usually made on based on probabilities, historical data, historical trends. They're subject to change, based on any factors and any change of that data, the amount of data and the quality of data.
Absolutely.
So at the end, AI plays, a crucial role, in streamlining, enhancing the lending process. You can automate a lot of tasks related to data verification, document analysis, risk assessment, report generation. This whole thing leads more to a more efficient process and more accurate lending decisions, while reducing the potential for errors, risk, and fraud. So it's something we should keep in mind, as we move forward, as AI is a very exciting field, you know, coming into technology. And that concludes my part.
All right, question and answers.
We have a couple of questions that did come in. I do want to note that if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box. The button's at the bottom of your screen. We will review and get back to you. So the first question here that I have is, would you recommend this automated process on purchases and refinances that are sold to the secondary market?
Well, that's a little bit of a tricky question because of the word "this." You know, it kind of insinuates that there is only one automated process. Automated title is performed currently in the process that provides full title insurance for the GSEs. So the GSEs require title insurance. Accurate Group, for example, we work with 3 of the national underwriters, and there's automation and automated reports built within each of those processes. Now, the automation may be a little different, the standards, because the historical depth, as we talked about before, you have to go back farther in time, so their hit may rate be lower. But each of the major underwriters we work with have also worked with ourselves and Fluid to automate some of that process. We mentioned an O&E report, an ownership and encumbrance report, a couple times during this presentation, primarily because we're talking to CBA, which is home equity lenders, which is the primary product within that, you know, that bandwidth. But when you're talking GSEs for purchases and refinance, GSE requirements for title insurance are always recommended, and all the major underwriters do have automation that we work with as part of those process. So while an O&E report wouldn't be acceptable to GSEs, a title commitment with title automation is. Ryan, Liz, have anything you want to add?
You know, I think you hit it on the head, Steve. You know, automation within title is used across all of the transaction types in the life cycle. The way that that appears downstream from an insurance standpoint looks differently. So it is happening behind the scenes to help make the process more efficient, more optimized. But to your point, it looks different on what that insurable product would potentially look like and what the output is from using the solutions from the home equity lens, like you said, O&E report, other solutions in other areas. You know, that would be a bit of a different conversation, but there's efficiency gains there, of course.
Absolutely. And, you know, kind of going back to standing behind that risk, if you're purchasing a title commitment with automation from it and you get a policy, they're standing behind it because they're providing title insurance on that policy. So obviously they have confidence in that data. Any other questions, Isabel?
Yes, so we do have another question here. Do you think Fannie and Freddie will accept this product in lieu of title insurance?
Yeah, very similar question. The answer would be no. Their underwriting guidelines wouldn't accept a product that isn't a title insurance product in terms of the end deliverable. Automation within the title commitment, title insurance process, absolutely they do today.
Great, and I think we have one more question here. Can title solutions bring efficiencies to the process beyond files that are fully automated, and how?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned before, as we were going throughout the process earlier, we use automation in our process often for putting our examiners and pointing them in the right direction. You know, so we'll go through, you know, the system, you know, work with, say, a partner like Fluid. They'll provide subsets of data automation. They'll provide very clear indicators. This is something we need to focus on. While at the same time, they may give us a very clear indication that this is airtight vesting, for example, got a very tight string of vesting. The automation can provide that and lets our examiner focus on the issue at hand, whether there's the gap, identifying the gap within that title stream, historical record, whether there's judgments that have to be reviewed to try to confirm, is it truly the party involved? But automation can get us to that stuff so much faster. So absolutely.
I have another question here. It says, can you explain how automated titled solutions can be used as a part of a cascade between a lender's front-end processes and titles workflow?
I've been doing a lot of talking. Liz or Ryan, you want to step in on that one? If not, I could handle that one.
Liz, you want to go on that one?
Yeah. So I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, Steve, that they're really designed as complementary solutions. So how can data intelligence be brought across different workflows, different processes to help create efficiencies and find optimization? So while yes, They might be used differently based off of where you are, if you're the lender versus the title lens of the transaction, but it's intended to be kind of that upfront look combined with that more downstream, very detailed in-depth search from an automated title process. And so combining them is where we see the greatest amount of lift, because you are able to confirm things with the borrower up front. You're able to clear those items on the back end from a title perspective and ultimately create that more seamless experience. So thinking about it as a cascade is really the right way to do it. It's a cascade. They're complementary solutions with unique purpose-built objectives, but are designed to support one another to help improve the overall process.
And it's with data-driven, right? Every piece of that is data-driven. Like we've been talking about this whole time, is you're leveraging information that's needed at the title level, but it's beneficial to streamline that upstream and downstream process. Yeah. So once we have access to the data, very authoritative data sets and or unique data sets for indicators, it streamlines, I mean, all the way upstream to the application, lender, right, process through and through to optimize, like we've always talked about, right? Continue to optimize the process.
Absolutely. And we talked about the stream. One thing we didn't touch on, because we gave a whole lot of examples on the front end, is using that same data on the back end. And once you've already booked that transaction, whether it's unfortunately for loss mitigation, if you have to do a re-record, if you do modification, things along those lines, you can reuse some of that data that's already been collected and already built to once again streamline that automation, use that tool. So there's, we point to the front end a lot because that's the origination and the underwriting process, but back end there's utilizations as well.
Absolutely are.
And I think that's all the time we have for questions. So if you have any outstanding questions, feel free. You can contact me at ibrennan@consumerbankers.com, and I can make sure that I get your questions in contact with who we need to get them in contact with, whether that's Steve or anyone at Accurate Group or someone at Fluid. Do you guys have anything else to add before I close it out?
I don't have anything yet. Thanks for spending the last hour with us, and thanks to everybody on the panel. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely, an exciting topic. Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much to all of our attendees and all of our speakers today. The session has been recorded and will be available within 1 to 2 business days. On behalf of CBA, thank you to everyone for joining, and have a great afternoon and a great weekend. You may now disconnect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.